Hello, hi, bienvenue, and welcome to the Me and My Mixtape podcast. I am your host, Matthew Hughes, and sitting beside me over the virtual realms of Zoom is the other host, or really the main host in my eyes, my beautiful man, Mark Woodiett. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. I feel like we're only on episode 3 officially, and each week you're getting a bit more friendly, a bit more flirty. Like by episode 9, I reckon you're in my pants.
The ice is melting slowly, despite it being very, very cold right now.
Yes.
Yes, so
Thank you.
But hey, you're welcome. So we are now on episode 3, officially episode 3, unofficially episode 4, but episode 3, mixtape 3. And the subject this week is a subject dear to both of our hearts. We may be 80s children, but we grew up in the 90s, baby. The 90s. So this is our favourite. This is tracks from our favourite albums from 1995, the year 1995. Yeah. Oh,
95 is insane. And, you know, I'm not just going to... I think I said this last time and I'll probably keep on repeating it, but to whittle this down to only 5 when, you know, no spoilers, but it was probably the biggest year for classic albums. When you look back... I'm not going to ruin it. I'm actually not going to say one album that was released that year in case it puts people off or gives them a bit of a hint of what we're going to talk about. But it's absolutely insane. As you're listening to this, pull out your phone, which you're probably on anyway if you're listening, Google 1995 albums, and you will just literally be like, how the hell did all that come out in one year? It's insane.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, you know, as children of the 80s, whenever I say the words children, I always want to follow it with Children of the Corn. Children of the Corn! Not Children of the Corn, children. So we were children of the 80s, which meant the 90s were our kind of like defining years, defining decade in terms of culture and music and all that jazz. And when we were kind of doing some research on the subjects to choose for mixtapes, I did have a brief look at most of the years through the 90s. And once you get past 91, 92, it's stacked. Like, it is stacked. 94, 95, 96. I mean, I'm not going to go through every year of the 90s, but every year is stacked. And I think I plumped with 95 because the size of these albums. These are big albums. You know, some of these records are some of them are debuts, some of them are second, third records, but, you know, they are big albums.
And the thing is, with 1995, it's no secret, I'm 42 years old, so I'm sort of 13 at this point, 14. I'm at school, I've got pocket money, or I'm doing a part-time like paper round, so I've got money coming in, and I'm actually going out there and actively looking for new bands. I'm spending money at Our Price and Virgin Megastore, and we're at Woolworths. Even Woolworths had good albums back in the day, and this is why I really enjoy this. So we're 80s kids, but 90s is when you could go out there and, you know, spend money and enjoy these albums. That's why I think this is really nostalgic and really exciting, because it brought back every memory of going out there and queuing up for albums. Yeah,
I remember doing that a lot at HMV when I was a teenager. So I'm older than you. So 95, I was 19 years old. So I'd kind of I was off to university, or no, I was at university. Off to university. It was around that sort of time. So I'd kind of had my kind of college years, which very much kind of informed my tastes. But by the time it kind of came to 95, 96, 97, it was about discovery. And I think a lot of the albums that I've picked, not a lot, I think a bunch of these albums that I picked, the kind of various reasons, you know, why they're on here, be it passed on from a friend or a family member, or an album that means a lot to me now that perhaps didn't at the time. You know, things kind of grow over time. So these are definingly our favourite albums of 95. And I think the way I've approached this playlist is, I don't know if these are my favourite songs off all of these albums. They're just songs that in my head make sense in the context of this mixtape. They aren't all the singles. They aren't all just the bangers for me. They're I mean, most of them are.
I've done the same.
Most of them are, but they're just songs that I really, really love off these albums. Let's get cracking. This week, this mixtape, it's this guy, Me, C'est Moi, to hit things off with the big old opening track. And This is a band we have spoken about a few times before, and
Every time, I think so far.
I'm sure we will speak about but we could not have missed off the Smashing Pumpkins, and I've chosen Bullet with Butterfly Wings from their insanely incredible third record, double album, The Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Big song, amazing lyrics, love the way that it builds. I think it's incredible. It won a Grammy in '97 for the best hard rock song. It is probably, I would say, in the top 3-5 of most Smashing Pumpkins fans' kind of favourite Smashing Pumpkins songs. Most will probably say Mayonnaise is their favourite, maybe. But as a starter for a mixtape, you kind of want to hit people with a banger, and this is a banger.
Unbelievable track, and so many memories, and not many bands can pull off a really good double album. I think there's a lot of filler. I think some bands are like, oh, we got to track 8 now on CD 2, we need to just pull out some B-sides. But this is a work of genius by Billy Corgan, and you could have had any song on here, like Zero, Tonight, 1979. 1979, I will say right now, is in my top 3 songs of all time.
Yeah, it's a lovely song.
Absolutely incredible. And it's all sounds timeless. And I remember discovering Smashing Pumpkins from when MTV Awards were on, and they came on and played, I think it was Tonight with the whole string section and the whole orchestra. And I remember staying up and watching it, and I'd not seen it before, and not seen a rock band with kind of using, at that point, violins and cellos, and it blew my mind. And obviously then I discovered it with Nirvana Unplugged, and I saw other bands start doing the whole Metallica orchestral arrangements for all of their albums. But this felt for me like the first time of that crossover. I was like, oh, actually, it's more than just the guitar and drums and bass. And I remember watching Jimmy Chamberlain. The snare work was incredible, and Billy Corgan was, completely bold and just looked like a vampire. And even my dad was sat next to me, and he's like, this is really good. And, I've said it, I think, on a couple of episodes back, you either love or you hate Billy Corgan's voice, but I absolutely worship it. I think it sounds great. It's exactly what I want from the songs, and they're just unique. When I hear a song by Smashing Pumpkins, the moment he sings, I'm like, yep, that's Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's a really interesting song. It's got a very... It's not really very Smashing Pumpkinsy to have a sing-along chorus, but it has a very sing-along chorus. It's kind of always seems to be like the loudest song when you kind of go see them play. Apparently it was kind of written in mind to go on the previous record, Siamese Dream. I think Billy Corgan had just had this tape. He'd just come up with this lyric, basically, "The world is a vampire," and he was like, "This is an awesome lyric. It's got to be something in it." So he's just got tapes of him like repeating the words, singing the words, trying to think of what to do with this amazing phrase, which is how the song starts, which is how this mixtape starts. "The world is a vampire," and yeah, it's so dark. It's such a sort of foreboding song. Corgan, as he does a few times on this album, compares himself to Jesus, which only sort of like adds to its sort of grandness, its grandioseness. It's not a word, I've just made it up. He's like, "Tell me I'm the chosen one. Jesus was an only son." He says a bunch of weird stuff on this record, and it's all the better for it, to be frank. I've seen the Smashing Pumpkins 4 times, I think. Let's say 3 times. But I never saw them tour this record. I saw them on Siamese Dream twice, and then at a festival, not too long ago. So I never kind of saw them when they were playing these songs for the first time. You get the, when bands tour and they know they've got an amazing record. They know they've got a proper classic that they've just put out, and people are excited about seeing those songs. They don't just want to hear the old songs, they want to hear the new songs, because the new songs are so awesome. I never got to see them in that sort of period, but I feel like we talk about the Smashing Pumpkins a lot, so I'm not going to kind of drag it out, but love this song. Definitely one of my favorite albums. I recently bought it on a vinyl box set.
Oh, I want that, but it's like 120 quid, but I really want it.
It's very expendy, but I decided...
It looks so good.
It was on my Discogs sort of like want list for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I had a really, really sort of crappy month a while ago, and I was like, do you know what's going to cheer me up? Buying a record that I've listened to 1,000 times and already own on vinyl.
You literally bit the bullet.
Yeah. Oh ho!
Thank you.
I did. Right, on that note, let's move to you and your first pick for this mixtape, Mark.
Well, that's an incredible start. I think just to hear that the world is a vampire is just the best way to start a mix. Oh, God.
Yeah.
So the only way I think I could follow this up is with the magic of Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters.
Lovely.
This is from the self-titled debut album, and the track I've gone for is I'll Stick Around. Now, for me, Foo Fighters was a huge movement because obviously after the death of Kurt Cobain, I felt like that was the end. And then you heard with Nirvana, Dave Grohl sing songs like Marigold, and I always thought, God, he's got a good voice, this guy. Like he's got something about him. And then suddenly from nowhere, he brought out this debut, which he plays every single instrument on. It's just him. It's his kind of demo. He's doing the drums, the guitar, the bass, vocals. It's really, really compressed, his vocals on this. It sounds really dated now. But the overdrive of the guitars, the fuzz, it sounds really kind of dirty. But it's great. And it's got that kind of Weezer guitar sounds off the Blue album. That's what it reminds me of. And it really blew my mind. And the first time I kind of witnessed it was in 1998, and they were playing at the Ozfest in the UK. And it was Ozzy, Pantera, Black Sabbath, Slayer. And halfway through the day, Dave Grohl came on with his band, and I think it was just before the release of Colour in the Shape, and he was playing these songs live. And hearing stuff like I'll Stick Around when I was 16 in a field surrounded by metalheads, it cost me £27 back then.
Wow.
And they were phenomenal. And everybody left like, this band is going to be huge. And then he obviously got Pat Smear. Later down the road, he got Taylor Hawkins. And went on a 20-year journey of giving us some absolutely incredible anthems. And I thought they were untouchable. I thought Dave Grohl was this god. I thought that he would never... I thought he'd just die a hero. But then the last few months have gone a bit downhill for him. We're not going to get political on the podcast, but he showed that he isn't this perfect god that we all believed he was.
Yeah, a bit fallible. It's not been a great 2024 for Mr. Dave Grohl. So I'm going to be very honest. I adore Nirvana, and I don't love the Foo Fighters. I bought this debut album on the basis of this single because I think it's amazing. It's so lo-fi. It's still very grunge, but it sort of also has this kind of power pop sort of, I don't know, it's very, very catchy. It's a really clever song. You can, and I think when it came out, I thought this was the first single for the record, but apparently it was This Is a Call. But this is the first song I remember hearing from the record.
Yeah.
And the weird video that was directed by Jerry Casale from Devo was awesome. And I was so excited about the sort of, the kind of trajectory, this kind of new band, Dave Grohl. Wow, he can do everything, right? And it was like that for a few records. I do feel that maybe it just happens when a band gets so massive, you just sort of, don't know, run out of ideas a little bit. So I don't love the Foo Fighters, but we're focusing on this song and this album and this album.
I'm with you though. I'm with you. Like this and Colour in the Shape are untouchable. And I think after that, I find one or two songs. So the album has like the Pretender on. I'm like, that's good. And then it's all filler. And then like One by One was a good single. but then it was a lot of rubbish, and I got a little bit to the point where I felt they went a bit kind of Nickelback. It was a bit like dad rock, and I was like listening to stuff like Run, and I was like, this is terrible.
Yeah, I do. I guess it's. I do think it's quite difficult when you get to a certain, get to a certain age to like. If you're super rich and you have massive success, I think it's got to be difficult to sit down and be like, right, what am I going to write the song about?
Yeah.
And in these early days, he was young. He had this insane sort of success thrust upon him, and then his bandmate and one of his best friends gets taken from him, and he has to fill this void, and he has to deal with it. He was young as well, so these first records have got that sort of ambition and fire.
Yeah,
and this
that's
song
fair.
is so good. I didn't know it, but he has come out since and said the song is about Courtney Love.
Right.
I don't owe you anything.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I think what's awesome with the mixtape as well is this is still very grunge, but like Smashing Pumpkins, they can write a chorus, and this is like power pop grunge choruses a go so far on this record, which is amazing.
I don't know you anything. 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 I don't know.
There's so much energy to start with these two tracks. It's like it's pure adrenaline, it's pure energy. So I feel like you need to either match it now or take us somewhere else, because I'm tired after two tracks. I'm like, my God, I need to lie down. I'm too old for this.
So your wish is my command, Mark. I'm going to switch lanes, and I'm going to add in a stunning song called Aftermath by Tricky and Martine Topley-Bird. So this is Tricky and his debut record, Maxinque, which was released in 1995, and it's just an incredible record. I think it was probably very much put into the trip hop, Bristol sort of experimental thing that was sort of very much happening in the mid 90s, 94, 95, 96, with bands like Portishead, the American DJ Shadow, you had full labels, Ninja Tunes, Wall of Sound, making these amazing records. But I think along with those ones that I've mentioned, I think Maxinque really stands up. I think it's a stunning debut record. I think it's so sort of, you listen to it and it sounds very downbeat, and it has a lazy kind of feel to it, which I guess is a kind of a sort of an audio template for trip hop, but it's so smart with its use of samples, its kind of mix of dub and techno and reggae and some experimental stuff in there, and all these lyrics about cultural dysfunction and his sexual kind of failures and drug use and fear of intimacy and all of this incredible, very meaningful, deep stuff coming from this incredibly interesting human being. And on this record, he met vocalist Martina Topley-Bird, who has a beautiful voice, and she's on loads of this record. And I chose Aftermath because it has this lovely sort of piano that just sort of lulls you into a false sense of security. And then it has a bunch of weird samples, and then it takes you on this sort of beautiful, awkward journey. And I thought it was a really nice moment in the mixtape to sort of introduce something very different.
It's got such a great vibe and beat, and I think it should be made for movies. When I'm hearing it, I think this should be opening credits of a film, or a car driving down like a real dark road with just the lights. It felt really atmospheric. But here's the moment I put my hands up and I'm like, Matt, I never heard this track until you put it on the mixtape.
Nice. Well, that's
this is what's good.
Yeah, this is great. So yeah, for me and my collection of friends, this was a big record, and I think this was before I moved to London. And even though Tricky is Bristol based, it sounds very London to me. It sounds very city to me. It's a wonderful record to listen to whilst walking or cycling or driving or whatever around the city. You know, you can just hear the smoke coming out of the speakers. You know, you can hear it in the way he delivers his lyrics, the way Martinez sings. It is experimental, but it's also incredibly kind of catchy. It's incredibly I'm trying to think of the word. It's not difficult to listen to. It's an album that can really fall into your brain very, very easily. And it was a huge record and critically acclaimed and sold really well. And Tricky went on to do a bunch of other really very interesting music and also appear in films, because I think, like you just said then, I think a lot of people listened to it and went, wow, this guy's incredible. Let's put him in films because his music sounds like films. I remember him appearing very strangely in The Fifth Element with his kind of stoned Bristol accent. Yeah, it's a wonderful record. If you don't know Tricky, I would definitely start with Max Quay and kind of move on from there.
Yeah.
He has a load of other amazing records. Blowback is one from 10, 12 years, which is even...
I've heard that album. I remember that. It's
awesome.
iconic.
It's even more than this. It sounds like an album made through a fog of weed smoke. Yeah.
It might be my driving music today. I've got a long journey tonight, so I might just stick that on and just, let it take over.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a really important record, and I think the way I got into it wasn't through Aftermath. So Aftermath is the opening track. It was Ponderosa, which has the same sample as a Portishead song. It's literally like, there are two bands from Bristol. They made incredible trip hop records around the same time and used the exact same sample, and it doesn't matter because they're both amazing. And there's also on the record there's a great cover of Black Steel by Public Enemy, but yeah, Aftermath is such a lovely kind of midpoint song. I'm very interested to know where you're going to take us after this little nap of a song has happened.
I kind of want to keep it still slightly chilled.
Right.
I want the vibe to be still. We're relaxing after Foo Fighters and Smashing Pumpkins. So Tricky's helped us just take it down a bit. We're on a bit of a come down now. We're a bit more relaxed. But I still want that big chorus. I still want to keep with the Pumpkins and Foo Fighters for singing along. And I've picked quite a small band you may have heard of, Oasis.
Who?
Yep. The album was What's the Story, Morning Glory, probably one of the biggest selling albums of all time. But the song I've gone for, even though you could have had Don't Look Back in Anger, Cast No Shadow, Morning Glory, Wonderwall, I've taken it all and I've actually gone, nah, I'm picking Champagne Supernova.
Nice.
What an album. Those songs I've just mentioned is insane. They're all on the same album. This is a band that I know right now taking over the world again because they've re-announced this huge tour. But my God, back in the 90s, this is the band I queued up at midnight. Remember, I'm like 13 years old. I'm begging my parents I think it was the Monday, to go to Our Price. $11.99 of my pocket money was spent, and it was this huge movement. When I was out there queuing up, the queues were massive, and everybody I knew was there, and it felt so magical. And I remember just the hype behind this album after Definitely Maybe was just, it was huge. They were it felt like the closest thing we'll ever experience in our lifetime to the Beatles, which my parents talk about, like Beatles mania.
Yeah.
One of the best ever choruses you'll ever find it's timeless. I listened to it again this morning before I started recording with you, and it sounds $1 million. The production of every instrument, of the vocals, the harmonies from Noel, Liam's nailed it. I think there's a recording on the Oasis documentary where it's just Liam and he's belting out this track, and it's, as much as he at times now doesn't sing as good as he used to, in his prime he was untouchable, and he just looks like he doesn't give a shit. He's kind of got a can in his hand, he's in this studio in somewhere in Wales, and he's just singing, and you're like, fuck me, this guy has got everything.
Yeah, so, Oasis, what a band. Very happy, managed to get tickets for their shows, the stadium shows, after unsuccessfully not getting them the first time. So, hurrah, managed to get some. Me saying I like Oasis or I love Oasis is a bit churlish. Oasis are, much like with British culture, I feel like Oasis are a part of me. And I don't really like indie music. I didn't really like Britpop. I found it incredibly annoying. Sort of, this weird coying for nostalgia from the 60s and 70s. I didn't like Britpop. I was more into hip hop and grunge, and I was more into other things at the time. But it really did feel like Oasis were that band that it didn't matter. They kind of got you with their songs and their attitude and their relationship with the brothers. They're from Manchester. I'm from Manchester. They're from the same part of Manchester that my mother's from. And you just couldn't escape them. I mean, you can't escape them now in the mid-90s. My goodness me. You could not escape them. And it's interesting that this song, which is my favourite song off the record, was their 6th and final single. They released 6 songs off this album as singles.
It's crazy.
They weren't even like, we should lead with this banger. They're like, no, mate. 6th single, definitely. I mean, everybody knows Oasis. They sold nearly 400,000 copies in week 1 when they released this record. It's one of the biggest British records of all time. It briefly made them sort of something in America, but then they couldn't really be bothered because that's very classic them. Couldn't be bothered really with breaking America, which it feels like they've sort of done over time. It feels like Oasis is this band that America really love, but because they never sort of had it at the time, and it's the songs have kind of grown and lived on. And I mean, this album, I think if you hadn't put this album on the mixtape, I think we would have had to have a conversation and said this album has to be on, because it's weird. There's a lot of great records here, but Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory can't not be on the list of best albums from any year, I don't think.
And luckily, we'll get to it shortly. There's one of yours which stands next to this, and
yes.
I'm like, if that wasn't on, I would have chosen it, or we'd have had 11 choices instead of 10.
Exactly. The 1 week, the one podcast, the one mixtape. Yeah. I love this song. Man. It starts with the washes of water.
It's beautiful.
Almost like you're on holiday, or it's the end of a holiday, or you're on the beach, and you're just, I don't know, coming to, or just realizing something is over. And I mean, the lyrics, like a lot of Oasis songs, make absolutely balls sense. I mean, slowly walking down the hall faster than a cannibal. What? Slowly
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Does it really?
When you're at Wembley and you're singing along, I was lucky enough that I was at the main road gigs back in the day. I went to Wembley. I went to the original Nebworth. I was obsessed, dude.
Wow.
Like, obsessed.
I bow. Goodness me, Mark. Holy shit.
There's an early gig. I was 13 and I went to the Blackpool gig, which they brought out on VHS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you can see me in the crowd. Like, you pause it. I'm like, it's so cool.
That is so awesome, Mark. I'm just genuinely slightly flushed with how awesome that is. I didn't know that. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. And I just went to they just before they broke up and had that massive fight on stage. I was at the Birmingham show of that tour. Honestly, absolutely, when they did Heathen Times, and it's incredible. At school at 13, I was in a band and we just did Oasis songs. And for an assembly, we got to play Wonderwall. No, Don't Look Back in Anger. And I wanted to be Noel, and the singer went on and had a pair of glasses, and he got a felt tip and put them so it made them all pink. And I, as I was playing guitar, picked up a magnifying glass like the video and was looking at all the, say crowd, the audience of other school members, and I looked like the biggest knobhead on the planet. But it didn't matter because we were playing Oasis at 13 in school assembly, and they've had a bigger impact on me than probably any other band. As much as I love Thrice and I've talked about Biffy Clyro, Oasis was just, I travelled all around the fucking country to go and see them at every show, all the big gigs they've ever done. I've got all the tickets. I've been to them all. It was incredible. But I'm not actually going to the reunion shows at the moment. So I'm sitting here right now, I'm not. But closer to the time, I'll be there. I'll get at Wembley and be singing along to this.
Wow, that's so cool.
Good luck now, Matt. You've got to top this.
So I think the tact I've taken here after that incredible song that everybody knows and loves is I've gone for something that's very personal to me and my mixtapes and my kind of musical taste. Sorry, I'm a big fan of hip hop. I love the hippity hoppity, and the 90s was a really fertile kind of period for hip hop, especially American hip hop, and you just had so many amazing records released every single month throughout the 90s. But luckily, in 1995, Liquid Swords by the American rapper Genius or GZA was released, and it is an outstanding album. It's an incredible record. GZA, Genius, I'll call him Genius, which was his previous moniker. This is actually this second record. He was a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, and this is the sort of second solo release following Wu-Tang's debut record, 36 Chambers, and it's very cinematic, it's very bleak, it's very dark, it sort of has a lot of samples, dialogue samples from a martial arts movie called Shogun Assassin, which is an amazing film. Side note.
Unbelievable.
Side note, amazing film. Really dark. It creates a very dark atmosphere. The songs kind of take on a sort of different meaning. I love that he was going for this sort of wide scale, big scope sort of vision with this record. I love this album. The song I've chosen is my favorite song on the record, which is Gold, and I don't even think it was a single. I think the singles that he released were Liquid Swords, which and Cold World and Shadow Boxing, which is they're all amazing songs, but Gold is my favorite song. And in the context of the mixtape, it is definitely a sidestep, but I feel like the 90s was a really exciting and interesting place musically, and you had sort of very interesting artists on major labels releasing records and selling a lot of copies. Kind of you're talking just pre-downloads, obviously pre anything streaming services, none of that nonsense, but very, very pre, well, I guess it was just about Napster just sort of is just about here. But it's very illegal, and people were sort of slightly worried. So people would release these records and sell a lot of copies. And as a record, it's certainly one that has stood the test of time, and it's always on, critical lists as one of the best hip hop records and blah blah blah. But yes, Genius or the Jizza and Gold is my track.
I was too much into my indie. I was Oasis, Blur, Pulp, all these bands. I until today I had not listened to this album. I listened to the track obviously to get ready for the recording. It's incredible. I'm now gonna spend some time really having a deep dive into it. But I was there, dude. I was Supergrass, Elastica. I was not the guy that was listening to hip hop. So I can't wait to kind of now. This is what's going to be really good about these episodes coming up. It's not always going to be the obvious choices. It's not always going to be songs that I know and love and can say, yes, Matt, or yours, yes, Mark. I can't, I completely agree. This is on one I have nothing to input apart from I'm going to now, let this now be something I take away as homework.
Yeah, that's awesome. And he's a really interesting rapper. He is, I think Wu-Tang are very sort of known as these sort of quick-witted, incredibly smart lyricists. It's almost kind of like a one-upmanship when you listen to the records. People are always trying to, you have Raekwon and RZA and Method Man and Old Dirty Bastard, and Jizza's kind of was very much one of the MCs that was sort of at the back of that. Personality-wise, he wasn't as big and as bold as Method Man or Old Dirty Bastard. And he kind of talks about his writing as being quite slow. He often kind of, rewrites lyrics and really takes the time and really, really thinks about things, which is why I think this album is so good. I think this record is so great. And, it really feels like he's trying to create a world and convey, stories and kind of, and ideas and yeah, it's why I instantly fell in love with this, and it's a record I still actually I have my record player just next to me, and I was listening to it yesterday, but it's not there anymore. I still listen to it all the time, and that's my mid mixtape pick.
No neighborhood is rough enough. There is no clips that's full enough. I can't fold, I need gold. I re-up and reload. Product must be sold to you. There's no cuts that's tight enough. There is no niggas that's fuck with us. I can't fold, I need gold. I re-up and reload. Product must be sold to you.
I feel like we've thrown people around a little bit today. It's been quite grungy and full on with energy. Now it's taken a bit of a chilled step down. We're quite relaxed, but now I want to start taking it back up, and I'm not taking it back up to the levels of Smashing Pumpkins and Foo Fighters, but I want to just give it a bit more raw, grungy, catchy, sing-along, and it's time that we had a bit of a change as well in the dynamic. So I want to introduce a female singer in this band, and even though I'm talking about all these great bands like Oasis, Blur, all these amazing indie times growing up, there was a movement which was incredible to see when you saw bands like Elastica and you were like, oh, okay, there's bands that are females that sing, and it wasn't as popular as it is now, and it felt like you had to really search for these bands that had females that front them, which is just fucked up to say now, but that's how it was. And we had bands like Alanis Morissette back then, which was incredible, and No Doubt. But one of them that kind of stood above them all for me was Garbage and Shirley Manson. And I was blown away by just how cool she was. Instantly, she was like this rock chick who had this great hair and stage presence. And the fact that she got to be in a band with Butch Vig, who's one of the best producers out there, who's in the band, he's helping write songs, and he's a genius. So this album came out, which is the self-titled album, and I felt like I heard this song Queer, and then I heard the song Stupid Girl, and instantly I was like, God, these songs I just want to sing along to. They're so catchy. And then suddenly I heard Only Happy When It Rains, and this is my choice because it's a huge song. The chorus will stay with you for weeks. After listening to it on this mixtape back after today's episode, I hope you all go and listen on Spotify and Apple and all this, because this song is just, it will stay with you. It will stay with you for days. It's so good, and it doesn't sound like any of the other tracks we've had. It's kind of got this dancey kind of processed drum beat. It's not this big rock song, and it's stunning. The production alone by Butch is unbelievable, but the band and everything, and Shirley's vocals, it's the breath of fresh air I think this mixtape needs to just change the dynamic a bit.
Yeah, the production on this album is phenomenal. Butch Vig is an incredible producer, but I think they're real, and so it just sounds just like it's heavy, but it's bouncy. It has a real kind of movement to it. It has a real life to it. It moves at a really amazing pace. I guess it's more of a poppy sort of grunge song, but what I love about it, I mean, apart from Shirley Manson, who is the sort of superpower in this band, like the way she sounds, the way she looks, the way she holds herself, everything, she's amazing. What I really love is the lyrics. I really love this sort of self-deprecation, this sort of looking back, or whilst it's happening, at grunge and grunge's insistence on doom and gloom and angst and being weird, and which I loved and love, obviously, but I really like that this band came along and wrote this amazing song with this huge chorus about wallowing in sadness, which I guess grunge is sort of, well, early grunge anyway, was sort of criticized for a bit. But yeah, Shirley Manson is amazing.
And they've still got it. You can still go and see them now. They're still banging out these songs, and they still have the energy they used to. And truly, if I see them play next year, I can't wait, because it'll just bring back every memory of being, yeah, I can relate to you, Shirley. Fucking hell, I want to be in my room on my own. No one talk to me. This is how life should be. Which is quite different to Champagne Supernova.
Yeah, a little bit. Do you think, look, like with Garbage, do you think, I know they're kind of back now, and still doing things, but do you think they're given a similar sort of pedestal? Maybe not pedestals. Do you think critically they were given enough kind of credit for writing these amazing songs, this incredible record? Yeah, I don't think they were either.
No, I don't know if they're a bit ahead of their time. I'm not sure. I think because of Elastica and PJ Harvey and people, I think they just took the limelight. I just think they're the band that your friends knew about, but not the masses. I don't remember ever going into the record store and being blown away with the amount of copies everywhere. I remember having to be like, oh, have you got the Garbage album? Like, it wasn't this big. Perhaps it was just the marketing. I'm not saying they weren't successful, because they were. They're absolutely huge, but they didn't get the recognition, or they weren't as big as I feel that they should have been.
Yeah, I'm not sure people talk about Garbage in the same way that they do about a few other bands from the 90s. And maybe that's because they were slightly ahead of their time. Maybe it's because production-wise they chose to sort of be more, not radio friendly, but they prioritize production and songwriting over kind of this dark sort of sadness. The videos were awesome, like really big, bright colored, and you can't really go, I mean, you have Shirley Manson in a video, it's always going to look super cool. They're an interesting band. I often think that maybe it's because Butch Vig is in it and he's the producer, as well as
they also, and it's not about the image and stuff, but the rest of the band, they're just like normal looking men. They didn't have any drama. They weren't going to award ceremonies and getting a name for themselves. There wasn't the Blur and Oasis versus Garbage. It was, they just kind of kept themselves to themselves. They don't look like this really cool dark band. It's all about Shirley, isn't it? So I think, I don't know, I'm not sure, but it's great to go back and listen to now. It's like you listen and instantly you're like, oh, I remember hearing this in a well, for me it was like a school disco, but I remember going and hearing these songs and getting to go and see them in Wolverhampton, and just, it felt like a nice little, I found this band and I don't want the whole world to know about it.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, they had this sort of similar vibe to the Pretenders for me as well. You had you had this really strong,
that's a great point,
kind of brilliant songwriter, and they made these big songs that were sort of dark around the edges, and they definitely touched on a bunch of very kind of important real things, but they were also incredibly accessible, I think. But yeah, awesome pick.
I'm only happy when it rains. Feel good when things are going wrong. I only listen to the sad songs. I'm only happy when it rains.
Back to you, and as I hinted earlier, there's one album that we could never have ever left off, and if we had, I would have never have joined a podcast with you. So let's hear it.
So I've chosen Radiohead and a song Just from their album The Bends.
Next choice, is that it? That's all we need to say.
That's all we need to say. Obviously,
That's the only reason.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I written down, Matt. The first thing when you sent the titles and ideas, it was the first thing I'd written down, and I went in and you're like, I've already got it. I'm like, bastard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wasn't that into Radiohead in '95. They weren't a band. I didn't love their first record. I wasn't waiting for another Radiohead record, and the Bends at the time. The Bends definitely wasn't an album. If you'd asked me in '95, my top, or '96, my top albums of '95, this would definitely not have been on the list. They're a band that I have grown to utterly adore over time, and the Bends is, I guess, the last straight kind of rock album I'm going to call it that they kind of made.
Yeah.
They went all out. The step up between this and their debut is incredible. The Bends is one of the greatest alternative rock records of all time. There is not one bad song. There is not one piece of music out of place. There is not a corner unturned in terms of making the flow of a record perfect. I could have chosen any song. I chose Just because I listened to it that day and I think it's a really good song. I could have chosen Fake Plastic Trees or Street Spirit or Iron Lung. I could have chosen anything. Because it's all flipping perfect. And this mixtape is about the best albums of '95, and this is, I'm going to say, by a country distance, the best record from '95 in my opinion. It's certainly my favourite record. And Just is a really awesome song, and I think it follows that sort of garbage, commercial-ish kind of grunge really, really well, because they were around Britpop, but obviously they flew experimental alternative rock flags, rather than Britpop. And this sort of magazine-influenced, riffy, kind of fun, odd song kind of really stands out on the record. I guess it's slightly less experimental than a lot of the others, and it is more of a sort of straight ahead sort of rock song, angular riffs and but yeah, I love the song. I love the video. I don't know if people remember the video of kind of people walking around London, and then at the end they're just all lying on the floor and there's no explanation.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's just like, what the hell? Awesome album. One of the greatest bands of all time. Well, certainly one of my favorite bands of all time. And we could not have. I mean, to be honest, this whole mixtape could have just been the Bends track one to the opening track to closing track. But obviously,
maybe in the future we'll do the best of Radiohead 10 tracks.
Oh my goodness me!
That would be challenging.
Yeah. I will say at this point, I fully appreciate and understand that there are kind of complicated issues in terms of some of the members of Radiohead and politically or whatever. But this podcast is not passing any
about the music,
political
man.
judgment. Is not passing. This is about exactly. This is about putting together a mixtape based on music and So we are. I acknowledge, but then slowly push that to one side.
What's really good about Radiohead is around this time I was having guitar lessons. My mum would pay each week a guy called Dave, and I'd go to his house and he would say, I'm going to teach you songs. He'd never actually teach me the theory or why a certain chord is chord C. He would just teach me songs and felt like, okay, this is the way I'm going to learn guitar. And I remember going and learning Polly by Nirvana, simple 4 chords. I was like, this is good, acoustic. Right, okay, I'm now going to discover Nirvana. And during the lesson, he pulled out this cassette and showed me High and Dry. And it was the guitar doing this really simple while 3 chords are being played. And my lesson was he'd be doing the main kind of 3 chords and I'd be doing the Johnny Greenwood little slidey bit and learning that technique. And I'd go home and I had a dictaphone at the time and I'd record myself playing the 3 chords again, play it back, and I'd be doing the lead bit over the top. And to have those 2 acoustic guitars playing that little lead bit as the intro is absolutely beautiful. And as a guitarist, you felt like you'd really achieved something by just doing these really simple slidey bits. But it made me absolutely fall in love with Radiohead. And I was never ready for I know we could talk about Radiohead for hours, but I was never ready to jump from that to OK Computer and then to Kid A. It's just been the wildest journey of my life with all the music they've done since. Is just, you know, you talked about how they went from Pablo Honey to this. Every jump and every stage is just wild, but they are by far my most listened to band of all time. And I will drive anywhere, and In Rainbows is just, it's embedded in me. It's genuinely an album that I truly mean this. There's never a week that goes past I haven't listened to one song on that album because it's just part of me.
Yeah, we have a thing in this house called Family Jukebox, and you know, we have these little speakers all over in different rooms and stuff, and it's a way that I wanted the kids to want to listen to music. I like listening to music. I like music in the house. I like listening to music when I'm working, you know, walking, whatever. When I'm not listening to Me and My Mixtape Podcast, that is.
Of course, available now.
Available now on all streaming platforms, as you know, because you're listening to one.
Because you're listening, that's a waste of a plug.
It really is. So yeah, we have this single family jukebox, and it's a way for the kids to sort of, which is basically me and the 2 kids and my wife take it in turns to choose a song to play.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so the kids have their own playlists that I make for them, and you know, one of them is Josie's hits and the other one is called Robin's Bangers or something, and whenever they listen or discover something that they like, we add it to the playlist. And you know, and I'm often criticized in this household for just putting Radiohead on every single time Family Jukebox comes up, and we have like Dua Lipa, and you know, Katie will play Montel Jordan, This Is How We Do It, and Robin will choose something from the musical Matilda, and then I will choose something.
Exit music.
I will choose something from In Rainbows or Deck Stark from, you know, or
Wow.
do you know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, Dad, this music is so sad. It's like,
And then it hits into Bluey, and you're like, okay, it's all good again.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is I'm with you. I listen to this band every single week. They're an insane band, but I feel like we have to move on now. And
Yes, we do, because we will do a Radiohead episode in the future.
Definitely, 100%.
You do it to yourself, you do. And that's why it hurts. You do it to yourself, just you. You and no one else. You do it to yourself. Do it to yourself.
So yes, can you tell me your penultimate pick?
Yes, like I talked about Garbage as this female-fronted band that changed everything because I was so into the indie world. Another band came along with this black singer, female, shaven head, and blew my mind. It was like nothing I'd experienced in my music up to this point, and it was Skunk Anansie. My God, the song is weak. It isn't weak, it's absolutely incredible, but it's called Weak, and it's probably got one of the biggest choruses of the 90s. It's absolutely epic, and the whole album has Selling Jesus as an opener, Charity, I Can Dream. Some of the best musicians you'll ever find in a 4-piece. The guitarist is incredible, leads it all, like Rage Against the Machine we talked about on the last episode, you know, a couple of episodes ago. Just has this power of pulling out these riffs, and every band that were kind of playing around my school, and I lived in Shropshire, so it's like Ludlow College. Every band that you'd go and see at Battle of Bands would be playing this song. It was this or Machine Head by Bush or Green Day, Basket Case. There were these songs that, honestly, in a night, you'd pay £2. There'd be 6 bands on, all playing to try and win, I don't know, a 6-pack of Coke and a pack of bloody Twixes and a little certificate. And every single band would play Skunk Anansie Week.
It's yes, it was an ever present song. In the world in this and I think that's a shame. It's a shame because it became a song and they became a band that I couldn't listen. It got to a point where you just Week especially was just and it's a phenomenal song. It's a really a wonderful song, and they're a fucking amazing band. And Skin is an incredible front person, vocalist.
Unbelievable.
Musician. And but yes, this song was much like Oasis, but this song was everywhere. I can't even tell you how many times I've been forced to listen to this song. And I own the record, so I choose to listen to it. But just it was everywhere. Yeah, but yeah, awesome band, awesome song. If you have 4 minutes of time at some point, you should definitely listen to Rod Stewart's cover of this from his.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, from his '98 album When We Were the New Boys. It's a thing to behold for sure for your ears.
I genuinely didn't know this was a thing, and I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
but I will listen to it.
Yeah. Sorry, but back to Skunk Anansie. So Paranoid and Sunburn is a flipping as a debut album.
Mind blowing.
And it's, I think what is not really considered is that, I feel like they're a heavy rock band, right? There's not alternative heavy, but I feel like they're quite straight down the line, Skunk Anansie. Like, there's not a lot of experimentation. They certainly weren't anywhere near Britpop. I don't think they're grunge. So this record was sort of, it's kind of a little thing all by itself, right? Obviously, it fits in a genre, and obviously there were other bands around them. But at the time in this country, there wasn't that much of a platform. If you weren't Britpop, and if you weren't, kind of a cool new genre band, I guess maybe like trip hop in the 90s, 95 or whatever, or dance, it was really difficult. So for a band to come along, produce a record this strong, and launch, this amazing front person Skin into the universe, and the record's filled with massive songs. Like the singles aren't just the only good songs. The album is a really good record. I think they deserve even more credit for sort of carrying this record, creating this thing all by themselves, really. And the fact that it stood the test of time and they're still a band and they're still touring, I think is amazing.
Yeah, they're playing next year. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah, my wife is desperate to go.
Yeah, let's all have a little day out.
So we'll have a little Paranoid and Sunburnt day out.
That'd be lovely.
Weak as I am, no tears for you. Weak as I am, no tears for you. Deep as I am, I'm no one's fool. Weak as I am.
Well, it's back to you, and it's your. Is it your final choice?
This is my final choice. This is my
Bloody
final pick. So this is from one of my favorite bands of all time. I feel like I say that a lot, but really, this is Faith No More. The song Evidence from the fantastic album King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime, which was released in May 1995. I adore Faith No More. I'm lucky enough to have worked with Faith No More on the Soul Invictus record. I've seen Faith No More live so many times. They're an incredible band, and they have not released one below par album, in my opinion. King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime came sort of at a weird time, I think, for the band. It's a heavy, weird album filled with soul and funk and jazz and R&B as well as kind of riffs. And I think that they're such an interesting experimental out there band. I do think that a large amount of people don't really get them.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. They just don't get it.
Yeah, and I think this record is wonderful, and Evidence is this brilliant part of the album that sort of, and I feel like on this mixtape as well, after this sort of, we've kind of gone on a journey up and down on this mixtape through the 90s, through 95, and Evidence is this sort of, it's got funky guitar and it's very chill out. You know, you've got Mike Patton's, the lyricist and the vocalist, kind of like almost whispering. He's not quite whispering, but it's very, very low in the mix, you know, his vocal. And it's a really odd song, but it's so catchy. It's so soul and influenced by kind of R&B. It's got a real groove to it, which I guess you wouldn't really, you know, always expect from Faith No More, but it's not one of the heavy riff songs on the record. I've chosen Evidence because it's a nice way to sort of wind yourself down towards the end of a mixtape. And yeah, it's produced by Andy Wallace in the band, and it's wonderful, and it's definitely a record, I think, that unless you're a Faith No More kind of super fan, that I think people do tend to sort of skip, unfortunately. But it's a really, really awesome record.
It's an amazing choice. And Faith No More is a band I missed out on. Annoyingly, I've never seen them live, and I had tickets to see them at Birmingham Academy just before lockdown, and I was like, my mate Darren and Scott were like, you're gonna absolutely love it, they're so good, it's a small venue, and all these bands are obviously cancelling because of COVID, but then rescheduling. So Incubus were like, yeah, we're coming back, and Sleep Token, but Faith No More were like, nah, you get a refund, you're just gonna live with that ticket for the rest of your life of what could have been. And I worry now I'm never going to get to see Faith No More, which will suck, because I've seen Mr. Bungle. Mike Patton is an absolute genius. People don't realise just how much of a great singer he is. He's got everything.
Oh, he's incredibly.
He's a genius.
Yeah, super charismatic.
And I really hope I get to see him. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really hope I get to see them, because it feels like that's one of the, you know, I'm really grateful I've been able to see some incredible bands, but Faith No More I've never seen, and it feels wrong.
So last time I saw them, so yeah, like I said, I was really lucky enough to work with them. So I saw the comeback shows, and they did a couple of shows at the Roundhouse. And I was lucky enough, I was managing a band called Rollo Tomasi at the time, and they released a record through Mike Patton's label, and were chosen to be a support. So they all met Mike Patton, and he had a lovely time meeting them. And I have a bunch of stories about Mike Patton and that band, which I'm not going to divulge in this. None of them are bad, but just a lot of stories. But I will say all of them are very interesting people. They're very sort of lived, you know. They're very charismatic. They're very thoughtful. They're very articulate, very smart people. You know, they didn't want to just be in like a metal band. They didn't want to just be in a grunge band. They wanted to do their own thing. And Evidence is a song that, I mean, it almost sounds like Burt Bacharach. I mean, it's very lounge, and you know, this is an album that has some great songs. Ricochet is a phenomenal song. Ashes to Ashes, which is the first song I heard from this record, is brilliant and heavy and more kind of, I guess, classic Faith No More. But I love this album. I love this band. And hopefully people will too, Mark.
I didn't feel a thing. You didn't mean a thing. In the eye, testify. Didn't feel a thing.
I feel the pressure's on me because last week you chose the closing track, and now it's all down to me. And
I did.
you started it so well with the Pumpkins, and I want to end it with a band that have had so much success for a number of decades, and I'm choosing this album because of the lineup change and a huge change in dynamics and sound, and it sounded like nothing else they'd previously done. And it's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The album is 1 Hot Minute, and the song is Aeroplane.
Lovely. So yes, a lovely funky way to end a mixtape.
It's going to be one that you're going to be singing again. You know, there's quite a few sing-along songs today, and I think that to end it on this is going to be good. And it's got, again, lots of energy. But this album, 1 Hot Minute, was a complete change for the band. They brought in, instead of John Frusciante, we had Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction, who is the epitome of funk. And there is no other guitarist like him. He is unique. He is a genius. And the power of changing a band that had such an established sound of this funky, raw American band that had these incredible songs from Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Mother's Milk, then to come out and have this dynamic change that changed for me the whole band. They all sounded like a different set of musicians. Anthony Kiedis was on fire on this album. The production, the energy, it sounds like disco, it sounds like party music. It's insane. It launches with the track Warped, which is just, it's basically Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers making a baby. You get songs like Coffee Shop, My Friends, which is beautiful, Walkabout, but Aeroplane is just the energy and the chorus that you'll be singing. It's amazing. You get little kids at the end singing along, which is great. I love that in music. But what I really, really love about this is I know that Red Hot Chili Peppers get a bit of a hard time. And I appreciate that sometimes on their later work, all you ever get is, hey, you, I think I saw ya. Let's go to California on everything. It's like,
Well,
how many times?
They do like California, Mark. They
How
do
many times
bloody
can you
like California.
fucking find things that rhyme with California? And they're getting on my tits. And I have to admit, some of the later work, I love Californication. I think it's brilliant. Scar Tissue, stuff like that. But after that, the last couple of albums have just been, for me, they're just not even trying anymore. It just sounds awful. And I've seen them live and they were terrible.
Oh, really? Oh, dear.
Absolutely dreadful.
Oh, dear.
But this album's great.
Yeah. So I feel like whenever anybody talks about if you're a fan of, especially if anybody that talks about the Chili Peppers, it almost feels like you have to apologize, or you almost feel like you're an apologist. I like the Chili Peppers. Don't shoot me. I'm sorry. But I do like the Chili Peppers, and I really like this record, and it's one that maybe the band don't even like themselves anymore, but I think it's really difficult. So this is 95, obviously. This is the follow-up to Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which is probably one of the biggest records of the 90s, certainly alternative records of the 90s. Sold 7, 8, 9, whatever million copies. Almost destroyed Jeff Frusciante, the guitarist, with its success, because he was so young when that came out. So Dave Navarro was a safe hire. He's a phenomenal guitarist. He's been around the block. He's been in one of the greatest bands, in my opinion, of all time, Jane's Addiction. And he's also, dealt with a bunch of fucking really shitty things in his life. So I think all of that put together felt like it was this sort of perfect kind of marriage. And I think the record is great. Like, it's definitely still a sort of funk metal, I guess. But, you do have these... I mean, Warped was the first single, and it was the first song I heard, and it's so huge. It's such a big fucking song. And like My Friends and Airplane and Shall I Be Thy Game, and Coffee Shop as well, like you mentioned. Really good songs, really good singles, really fun record. I think, bar Californication, this is probably the last, 8 out of 10 upwards Chili Peppers record. I think.
Yeah.
I think before this, they have a bunch of very exciting records, and then Blood Sugar, which is this flipping monster, this absolute Rick
It's
Rubin
insane.
produced behemoth.
Yeah.
And this was produced by Rick Rubin as well. But I mean, with Blood Sugar, Rick really, you could tell that he was excited by this young collection of musicians that had kind of created a sound, created this world for themselves. And, he was so excited to kind of get his hands on that and to take them from Mother's Milk, which was such a brilliant record anyway, to really like fulfill their potential. Yeah,
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing, the journey. I mean, I'm just looking now at the latest albums: The Getaway, Unlimited Love, Return of the Dream Canteen. Just, there was nothing got me on them. It's a shame. I liked By the Way, that was good. I had a couple of good tracks.
that's yeah. By the way, had some good singles, but I don't think it was a great record.
A lot of filler.
Filler. And with the Chili Peppers, you're talking interesting first couple of records with Freaky Styley, very funk, very, very, very sort of P-funk, George Clinton, funkadelic, sort of influence, a lot of kind of that sort of influence. But by the time you get to Uplift Mofo, Party Plan and Mother's Milk, they got a sound, they've got a vibe, they kind of know who they are.
Definitely.
And then with Rick Rubin, that triple hit of Blood Sugar, One Hot Minute and Californication.
It's insane.
That's a good run. That's a good, and that's like mid-career. That's a mid-career run. That's not your debut, So yeah, awesome song. Love the video. Love Dave Navarro. If there are anybody out there that is turned off when we mentioned the words red and hot and chili and peppers, then more fool them, Mark. More fool them.
Yes.
I like pleasure spiked with pain, and music is my aeroplane. It's my aeroplane. Somber, sweet and sour chain, and music is my aeroplane. It's my aeroplane. Pleasure spiked with pain.
And I'll stand proud. I think the choices are very personal, which you've got to remember. It's us, it's me, it's Matt. It's what means a lot to us. And sometimes you'll agree, sometimes you'll want to burn our house down. But hopefully you'll keep listening, you'll keep subscribing, you'll tell your friends that you listen to this, and share the love, because it is only a celebration of music.
Yes, please do. As we come to the end of this podcast and the end of this mixtape, please do tell us on our socials at Me and My Mixtape. And at Me and My Mixtape Podcast, what you think of the shows, what you think of the podcasts, what you think of the mixtapes, because all of the mixtapes are going live with each podcast, our Spotify playlists of the mixtapes, the 10 tracks that we're talking about each week, each podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, if you've discovered anything we've missed. I do like it when people on the internet tell me when I've done something wrong. It's a really special thing waking up to being told that I'm wrong. So if you could do that and enhance my day, then wonderful. Thank you very much. So yes, that is the end of this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week with another podcast, another subject, another mixtape. I'm very excited about next week's podcast.
Yes.
I'm not going to give anything away, but it's a really cool subject. So this is just left for me to say thank you very much, Mark Woodyatt, for joining me again.
Thank you, Matthew Hughes, for coming back and sustaining this. And I hope we can carry on and get to the Radiohead special very soon.
Yes, indeed. Thank you and goodbye.